Hi, I'm Bri.
And I'm Catie.
Mellowly discuss movies.
Yep, that's it.
Catie, how are you today? Catie, how are you today?
Sorry, I can't hear you. I'm great, Bri. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Have you been watching anything lately?
I just started watching that Hollywood show that's on Netflix.
Mm.
I'm really into it, but also I'm very conflicted because parts of it seem very problematic, but also parts of it seem like very progressive. And Janet Mock is one of the producers, and I trust her.
Okay.
But also Ryan Murphy is the main producer, and I do not trust him. But it's a good show. It's really entertaining. I would recommend it.
That show looks very intriguing, and there's also another show that looks interesting. It's like a teen show.
Oh, is it that one about the lake or whatever? All those kids live by a lake.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that. I would watch that. I heard it was like they're like looking for sunken treasure.
It seems pretty interesting, and I watched the trailer and I was intrigued. So
I gotta say, like, in this quarantine, props to all the streaming services for like releasing stuff in a pretty rapid manner. And like, I feel like they're releasing really solid content right now.
I totally agree. Did you see the new show about Space Force with Steve Carell?
I did not.
It says from like the creators of The Office, and it's Steve Carell, and he is a government person, but he gets assigned to work for Space Force, and it's a comedy.
Okay, I'd watch that.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. So yeah, you're right. They're pumping out really good content.
I'm because so many of my students speak Spanish, I've been watching a lot of Spanish content on Netflix, and you need to watch Elite. It's like a teen drama, and you would fucking love it.
That is on my list.
Yes. Watch it so we can talk about it. Also, Money Heist is pretty good. And I don't know, there's just a bunch of really good international content on Netflix that's been popping up since I started watching Spanish shows. It's an untapped well of really good content.
All right. So should we get started with the thing?
Yeah.
So this week, Catie and I watched one of my favorite movies, What We Do in the Shadows, which came out in 2014, which is I thought it came out in 2017 for some reason.
I was gonna say I thought this movie was so much older. I was gonna say I thought this movie came out in like 2009.
Ooh.
I definitely didn't watch this movie until college.
It's a New Zealand film, so
Yeah.
I don't think that it got a lot of recognition until a couple of years later. But yes, it came out in 2014, and it's a mockumentary about vampires. It was written and directed by Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi, and it is starring Taika Waititi as Viago, Jermaine Clement as Vladislav, Johnny Brew as Deacon, Corey Gonzalez Maurer as Nick, Stu Rutherford as Stu,
I love that.
Ben Francham as Peter, Jackie Van Beek as Jackie.
I love when the actors are like they just use their real names.
Mm-hmm. All right, Catie, what did you think about this movie?
Okay, I love this movie. It's so funny. So actually a like kind of shitty thing happened to me with a guy, and then immediately afterwards to like chill myself out, I watched this movie, and I was so bummed when I started watching this movie, and I was fucking laughing myself to death by the end of it. And I felt so much better. So I love this movie.
When was the first time you watched this movie?
I honestly can't remember. I feel like this was something that like either you or Chaley or Pilar was like, you gotta watch this.
Yeah, I love this movie. It's a great film to show your friends who don't like horror movies, but you are in a horror movie mood. So this is the compromise film.
That's so true. I really truly dislike the like bloody, gory horror movies. And this movie definitely is pretty bloody, but I don't like it's funny to me the amount of blood they use. Like I feel like that's one of the comedic elements that's not like just there to be disgusting.
Yeah, I just love this movie. I don't even I don't even know how to talk about it. I found out that isn't it's a lot harder to talk about movies that are amazing.
Because it's like so easy to rip on a movie.
Let's just talk about what we loved. Do you want to start?
Yeah. So I love a mockumentary, but I think it's something that's not often successful. Like, love The Office, love Parks and Rec, but also, like, there's many shows that have done it and totally failed. But, like, this was so good. Like, I love how they incorporated the camera people at certain points. Like, when they were at the big ball at the end, like, the camera guy, like, the vampires start closing in, and the cameraman, you can tell he's, like, backing up from the situation. And there's definitely, like, a couple times you can tell by the camera work that the cameramen are, like, reacting to the situation, which is great because they're there too. It's not a mockumentary if you don't include the, like, staff as well.
I totally agree. And I think what would have made The Office a bit stronger at the end, the ninth season, they incorporated the camera people, you know? And I thought that was interesting. Like, I like the fact that they had relationships with these people as well. And I wish they kind of showed that throughout the years because it was kind of a surprise to me at the end. I think, Catie, you know what I'm gonna say?
Do you have a timestamp?
I gotta talk about how this movie is like the perfect length. This movie is under an hour and 30 minutes, and there is a very clear 3-act structure that's roughly 30 minutes, and it is so simple, and I love the simplicity of that. And it just blows my mind that something could be, it's not the longest movie, but like the attention to detail, like it's kind of like I want other directors to see that you don't need to make like 3-hour long movies to make a point or to show, to create. I don't know. You know what I mean? You don't have to always drag it out.
And I genuinely think part of that is due to the fact that it's a mockumentary. So, like, the documentary people would have already cut parts out. And I know this is, like, meant to be an actual documentary, but, like, it makes sense that there's not a lot of, like, long in between bullshit scenes.
No, it's true. It just seemed, everything seemed very focused and very purposeful. The movie kept moving.
Yes.
And it's so easy to watch and it's so much fun. You know, I watched this last week and I watched it last night, and, you know, I found it funnier the second time.
It's, you know what? Like, it's one of those things that because it has so many fucking good jokes, like, even if I've watched it recently, I don't remember all of them. So I'll like go in and be like, oh, swearwolves. But then like later in the thing, there'll be like something else that I totally forgot about. And it's still funny.
Yeah, no, it's great. Another thing that I like about this movie is that the jokes land.
The jokes absolutely land.
I feel like there was a lot of care put into the humor. It wasn't like stupid jokes. They were clever.
But you know what? I feel like a lot of it was also improvisational. Like, I definitely think there were scenes that were improvised.
Yeah, I can see that because there were a lot of quick, like, natural. There's a flow that all of the actors had with one another.
Yeah. Because, like, I know Taika Waititi does a lot of improvisation on his stuff. Like, Thor Ragnarok is like leans really heavily into improvisation. I don't know. I guess my point is that I just think it like lends to the like naturalness of their conversation.
For sure. Another thing that I thought was strong is that this is a horror movie and a comedy and a mockumentary, but I feel like if this was considered just a horror movie, it wasn't comedy, it was just a pure vampire flick, I think the effects would still be considered good. And I felt like the effects in this were excellent.
I agree. I mean, like, it's pretty old in technology years, but like, there wasn't anything I really looked at and I was like, wow, that's pretty old school. And I feel like it's because they used mostly practical effects. Like,
Mm.
all the makeup was like, there weren't a lot of like giant prosthetic pieces. And like, I'm sure all the blood and whatever, they can do that with like a pump and a rig. I don't know. It's just, it's not like a hugely flashy movie with effects. So I think that's another one of the reasons why it holds up is because there's nothing that like really pulls you out of your suspension of disbelief.
Also, I think that the cast is excellent. I love that it's a small cast, and I actually remembered like all of the vampires' names after the movie was over because they're so memorable.
They do have unique names.
Do you have a favorite? Who's your? I know who your favorite is, but I want you to say it out loud.
No, I want to hear what you think.
I think your favorite is Vlad.
You're right.
There's one scene at the ball where he does like something you would do.
Is it the scene where he shows up dressed to kill to like impress his ex? Because that's definitely a me move.
Yeah, it was like it was just his entrance. I was like,
Oh, when he like whips the cape off. Yeah, I'm really extra.
I was like, yeah, this is Katie's favorite one.
Which one's your favorite? I have a guess for you too. Oh my god, I've forgotten their names. I forgot to watch the movie last night. It's Taika Waititi's one.
Yeah!
I knew it!
Oh my gosh. So the thing is, he reminds me of my friend from college, and they have like the same comedic timing. And like, I miss him so much, and I see like Viago's character in him, and then like he's just so like he's a Virgo for sure.
For sure.
He's like the most Virgo person I've ever seen in my life.
So, like, in the first act, we're introduced to all the vampires and their situations. And I personally think one of the best scenes in the first act is where they're having the house meeting and they all get into a fight over doing the dishes. Because that is so real. I've had that fight so many times with roommates.
That is such a realistic scene. There are some of my favorite lines in that conversation when Viago says, Peter's 8,000 years old. He's not coming to the meeting. Like in the most sassy way possible.
But also, like, one of the things I love about this movie is how it's really good at blending like everyday, normal, mundane things with like these crazy magical vampire situations. Just that. Him just casually dropping, he's not coming. He's 800 years old.
It's just so funny. And the intros to like Deacon, I laughed so hard when Viago was like, Deacon is like the young bad boy in the group. Like, he's definitely like in his 40s or 50s. And then they said that Vlad is 16. Vlad said he's 16 years old.
That fucking killed me. Shut down in the prime of my life. Life was hard then.
What I also like is how they incorporated like paintings and like archival footage.
I agree.
Like it looks like old, but you know they like repurposed the shot or whatever. But I thought that was very clever to do.
No, it like makes sense too. It like makes it more realistic because it's like, yeah, these are actual people as well as being vampires. Like every time, oh, you know what I love too is when they were doing the montage of the ball and it was showing them with the costumes all the years back, and there was like you could see the decades going back. It was like they were being crazy in the 70s. Ooh, now it's 1902.
Yeah, I love that. And I think like it was kind of cool to see how like in the past those pictures were very scary, but then they get like more modern. It was kind of funny to see that shift.
Yeah.
In the intro.
I also like love though that each of their unique characters has made the decision to commit to the clothing from the time period they were turned into a vampire.
Yeah, it's so funny when they go out. We're going out to party. Vampire style.
The scene where Deacon's like dancing.
I can't. I can't. And then we learn in the first act about Viago's love story, and it's so sad. His love story with, I forgot her name.
Catherine.
And I think this scene is hilarious because as he's talking about her, you hear this background music, and then you realize it's like the vampires playing the music, and it's really bad. But you can tell, like, they're trying, and it's so cute.
They're so sweet to each other.
They are. And there's just, like, so many little details. Like, I love the detail that since they can't see their reflection in the mirror, they draw each other's outfits.
There was, like, one part where I can't remember who it was, like, brought a victim home and, like, the blood got all over some kind of, like, chaise lounge or something, and Viago comes in and he was like, "That's from 1926. It's irreplaceable."
He was a Virgo. Catie, I know you loved when Vlad said, "This is my torture chamber."
I did.
And he's so proud. There is only one thing I don't like about this movie.
Which is?
I don't like Jackie. I don't like her storyline.
I found that very annoying. I don't know. I thought it was funny up until a point, but like I thought they kept doing the joke where Deacon was basically enslaving her like a little too much.
Yeah, and it got kind of sad for me after a while.
Yeah.
But the thing is, in the show, they have a show, What We Do in the Shadows, and the familiar is really funny. It's funny. The familiar, it's a funny storyline. It's not that sad.
Yeah.
Because I felt like sorry for Jackie. Like, she's obviously so desperate, and then you saw she had a family, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I know this is a mockumentary about vampires, but
well,
yeah.
like it also rubbed me the wrong way that like after she got turned, when she went home to her husband, she was like, "I am your master now." I don't know. I feel like that's like a really fucked up thing. That like it would have been cool if they explored that, but also that's not this kind of movie.
Yeah, for sure. But that was like that's the only thing that didn't work for me.
I like didn't like Jackie like as a character. I mean, not even just as a character, I just didn't like her. But I feel like we were like meant to dislike her. That's just what I was saying.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So at the end of Act 1, Jackie brings them some people so they can suck their blood. One of them dies, but then one of them actually gets turned into a vampire by Peter.
Oh, Peter.
And, you know, I thought that this was brilliant for them after the first act to do 2 months later. Because time jumps are awesome. I love time jumps in films. I love that. I love it.
Always a good thing.
Also,
there's very few times I've seen a time jump and been like, fuck that.
Yeah, also in reality TV shows where like they show the end of the season and they're like 10 months earlier, you know?
Oh my god. Like that season of Vanderpump when Jax cheats on Brittany and it starts at Sheena's masquerade ball and everyone's like spreading the gossip and then it's like 2 weeks earlier. That killed me.
Yes. But I thought that was excellent. I mean, the Endgame 5 years later. Like, are you serious? Were you not floored in the theater seat next to me, Catie, when that happened?
I was.
And we get a second act. So Nick is like a new vampire.
Which is fun.
Yeah, I love that. So it's like a new era of vampire, Nick, but Nick is a little outspoken about being a vampire.
I feel like it's almost dually funny in that like he's a new vampire and obviously he's gonna be like fucking stuff up because he doesn't know. But I feel like it's almost like in order to reinforce that he's a baby vampire, they make him kind of act like a little kid, which I think is hilarious. Because, like, you know, if you got turned into a vampire as like a third grader, we would have been running all over wild. telling people about it.
And I love one of my favorite lines he says is Twilight.
Oh my god, I forgot.
And like no other context, he just like screams that in the street, and I was like, Nick, I get it.
I feel like definitely at one point too, he was like, you know, Twilight, that's me.
Yes, you know, Twilight, that's me. Yeah, Nick was hilarious. But with Nick comes his best friend, Stu, who is amazing. So Stu is a software analyst, and surprisingly, like, all of the vampires love him.
Everyone just loves Stu.
And like Stu is so precious, he introduces them to like technology. And Catie, when Vlad was taking a selfie, I was like, that is us in middle school with our Nikon Coolpix cameras.
That's exactly what that was.
I was like, oh my god, that's also what made me think of you, Catie. I was like, this is her favorite character.
I feel like it's just how I would act if I was a vampire.
Another part in the second act that I love is when Nick is explaining to Peter like who Stu is, and Peter is like listening and nodding and not being creepy. He's like he's genuinely listening to Nick explain like that that Stu is a human and that everyone like really enjoys his company.
I really enjoy Peter's character, mostly because it's a giant shout to Nosferatu, but also just because, like, could you fucking imagine having like an 8,000-year-old vampire living in your basement?
No.
Or just like even having just like a really, really old man as a roommate, and they do all the normal things, like they bring him up to feed him and whatever, and they're like, this is stew, we can't eat stew. Kind of like in the same way you'd like talk to your grandparents who are like really, really old and feeble, like, oh, can't have too much sugar, granny.
Yeah, like that's how Viago was talking to Peter at the beginning of the film.
Peter, time to wake up.
Like, wakey, wakey.
I just want to return so fast to Nick. One of my favorite and the grossest scene in the movie, in my opinion, is when they're like out at the chippy or whatever, and he like eats a fry and then immediately goes out back and is like projectile vomiting blood for like 10 minutes.
I literally said that is the best throw up music in the world.
That's the best throw up scene in any movie ever. I also like how clearly fake it is too. Because, like, you can tell it's not actually coming out of his mouth and they've got, like, a hose really close by. But I think it's a hilarious scene.
It's so good. And also, I love how Nick gets them into the club.
Oh, yeah.
And Viago says, we are at Boogie Wonderland and we are having so much fun. And after Boogie Wonderland, they're, like, walking back home. And Vlad is like, we are about to walk past some werewolves, so some shit may go down.
The exchange when they introduce the werewolves for the first time is one of my favorite scenes in the entire fucking movie.
I love that they incorporated Twilight in this in a funny way.
I really appreciated, like, all the nods they have to all the, like, modern and classical horror tropes, because like I love that they throw Twilight in there, but also like you can tell where they're pulling from, like Dracula and like those like 50s classics, like the Wolf Man or whatever. It's very rare that you pull that off well, and he did it. I feel like the werewolves are just like those like Australian rugby team guys who like peaked in college, and then one of them is like, hey, you know, if I bite you, you can start turning into a dog. And the other one's like, all right, I had enough beers, let's do this.
Yeah, I feel like that was it was just so funny, their exchange. Werewolves, not swearwolves.
Great line.
So, as we mentioned earlier, Nick keeps telling everybody, hey, I'm a vampire. And because of his big mouth, the reason a vampire hunter comes to their house and kills Peter.
Yeah.
I was really sad. I did not like hearing Peter squealing. That part was really scary to me. And then when the police show up, were you holding your breath?
Yeah.
The policewoman said, "What are you cooking in here?" And he goes, "Barbecue." That was so funny.
They're just so awkward and I love it.
But this results into Nick getting kicked out of the house. It's sad. And then they do the shame.
Did that happen before Game of Thrones did it? Or were they parodying Game of Thrones?
I have no idea.
Okay, season 5, episode 10. It came out before Game of Thrones did it.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Game of Thrones, watch yourself.
Nick gets kicked out of the house, and then the third act begins, and there's another time jump to several months later.
I liked that they did that because I feel like the time jumps are also what's contributing to the good length of this movie and the good pacing of this movie, because they're not wasting their time doing just like, just like a BS, like, oh, we're just gonna go to the grocery store together today, and this is what it's like going to the grocery store as a vampire. Like, they didn't need those scenes. They know they didn't need those scenes, so they skipped them.
Yeah, it was great. So it's time for the Unholy Masquerade Ball, which takes place on the 6th of June at 6 p.m. 666.
Yep.
They're all really excited, especially Miyako.
Viago is hype for this party.
He's like 666.
I feel like Viago is the one who, like, on Halloween organizes a group costume and, like, very intensely takes his part of it seriously. And then, like, when everyone shows up in mediocre costumes, he's, like, very upset about it.
I'm telling you, he's a Virgo, because that's exactly what I would do. So, like, this first scene of the third act is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, because there is a guest of honor that is honored at the Unholy Masquerade, and Vlad thinks it's going to be him, but it turns out to be the Beast.
I think I knew that was going to happen already, but it didn't make it less funny because of how he reacted to it.
Yeah, I think the pairing of Vlad throwing a temper tantrum and Viago quietly explaining why Vlad is upset at the same time.
Fucking hilarious.
And yeah, so then we go to the ball, and I love that this movie ends at a party.
Yes.
And then we see Nick, and we see Jackie.
We see Stu.
Yes, there was a Stu reunion, which I thought was so cute. But then, before, like, shit went down with the Beast and Vlad, I was like, Stu should not be there right now.
The second they showed them, I was like, this kid's fucking dead.
And of course, Nick brought him there.
Also, they introduced us to the fact that zombies exist in this world.
Yeah, and I like that this movie alludes that there was only one zombie at the Unholy Masquerade.
No, it doesn't.
Well, remember that part where they are dancing and it's the mirror shot and we only see Stu and the zombie dancing?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone else is, like, not there. Well, I'm assuming they're all vampires.
They also definitely mentioned, like, witches or something like that at one point.
I was a little confused why there weren't more zombies. Like, I felt like there was only one I saw, and then that shot with the mirror. So, yeah.
Maybe zombies are a rare breed.
So then people start noticing that Stu is actually human, and the Beast is like, why did you bring a human here? And then they're like, Stu, tell them what you do. And he's just so humble. And he's like, I'm a software analyst.
I think the funniest parts of this movie are the, like, deadpan responses to questions that, like, seem normal but elicit, like, a really ridiculous response. Like, that whole thing where it's like, oh, what do you do? I'm a software analyst. And then it's like, oh, we have a human.
I think Vlad goes into a depression because the Beast is the guest of honor. But then he comes out of the depression of the night of the ball and faces the beast, which we find out is his ex-girlfriend, Pauline.
Pauline.
And they have a huge face-off. But the funniest part is that Stu stabs Pauline's lover with like a giant stick.
Oh yeah, and her lover is like this like gross slime monster, but he's also a vampire.
I just love that Stu literally stabs a vampire with like a wooden stake.
I was just gonna say that I also love that when they get kicked out of the party, like they're just going through and they're like, yeah, Stu, you're the man. Because you know, if we'd pulled some shit like that at any of our middle or high school dances and like we got in a huge amount of trouble and got kicked out, we would be fucking celebrating.
Yeah, and they're like, Stu, 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 Stu. But as they are walking away from the party, they run into the werewolves on transformation night. Excellent. This is excellent. This was like the perfect way to introduce the werewolves. You have you have like one extreme of meeting them out at night, and then you have another extreme of meeting them out on their transformation night. Like, what? That's crazy.
They definitely made some period jokes.
I didn't notice the period jokes.
I was not shitting on it. I thought they were funny, but I don't know. I thought the jokes from this scene were some of the stronger jokes in the movie.
I think that I was so enamored by how great like the plot and the story was that I wasn't really paying attention to the jokes in this scene because I was so like startled by everything that was going on. But I think next time I'll watch it, I'll pay closer attention.
I think because I've seen this movie before and I know the basic plot, I'm like no longer frightened by scenes that are meant like I know Peter's gonna die. I know that the whole thing with the beast is gonna happen, and I know that Stu turns into a vampire and like that kind of stuff. So I feel like I don't really feel that tenseness at the scenes where I'm supposed to. So I found myself in this watching paying a lot of attention to the jokes, especially because I had watched Ragnarok like pretty recently for the show. And he had directed that as well. I was like, I know Ragnarok's really fucking funny. I remember this being really fucking funny. I want to remember why.
Yeah, for sure. So the werewolves attack and they think that Stu has died, but surprise, surprise, Stu got turned into a werewolf.
Oh,
wasn't that great?
It was great. And I love, honestly, I think my favorite scene in the movie is when they bring the werewolves over to the vampire's house and they're like broing out and like Stu's like, yeah, you can be friends.
Yeah, I love like the end. I think that is like such a cute ending, and it was such a satisfying ending too that like Stu introduced into the human world, but also Stu is introducing to the werewolf world, and I think that's cute.
Again, we've been talking so much about how the length of this movie and the pace of it is the strength. They wrapped up so many things in the third act, like really subtly. So like by the end of the movie, there was nothing left that I was like, wait, they never talked about this.
Every point they brought up, they brought back in the end. Viago gets his time with Catherine, turns her into a vampire. She's 90 years old.
They did the thing with Vlad and the Beast. Boom, done. Viago and Catherine, done. Deacon and Jackie, done. Like all of that. And then the only thing left was the werewolves, and then they had Stu bridge that gap, and then I was like, oh, this is adorable.
Yeah, it was great. I love this movie. You love this movie. Everyone watch this movie if you haven't.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's so good. All right, that's it, guys. Bye.
Bye.